Hey everyone, big question for you. Should you read the messages between your husband and the affair partner? Today, I am going to help you figure this all out. I will give you a list of questions that you need to ask yourself before you decide to read the message or continue to read the messages. So I want you to ask yourself these questions before you read the messages. So my question to you before we actually get started is, have you read the messages? Feel free to let me know below if you've read the messages between your husband and the affair partner. Are you wondering if you should? Let me know that below. Do you ever feel like you've read too much? Some women feel like, almost a regret. Like you just want all that information at the beginning. And then once you've read it all, there's almost this regret because you have so many thoughts, images burned in your head. And let me tell you this, we talk in stories as humans. We tell our friends stories. It's how we feel better. But we also tell ourselves stories. We talk in our brain to ourselves in stories. And so are you looping a lot of the messages you read and trying to put the pieces together? Because it's one snapshot. When you see those text messages, it's I love you, I miss you that you're reading, or you're seeing pictures of, horrible things, right? And so you're seeing that, you're kind of trying to fill in the gaps because your husband won't be fully transparent. And so we start to tell ourselves stories. So have you read the messages? Let me know below. Are you wondering if you should? Do you feel like you know too much information? Have you read too much? So anyway, we'll get to all the details of that. But by the end of this live, here's what I want to do for you. I want to do three things. I want you to know the questions you need to ask yourself before you read the text messages or going forward to read any more. I want to give you the pros and the cons of reading them, and some of them you'll know, right? Some of them you already know, but I'm going to give you a few others that may not be so obvious. And I want to talk to you about how much should you read in regards to your healing, what's best for your healing. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm Beth Miller, and I am the founder of Soulify Wellness and the Marriage Saver program. I am also the marriage coach here. I am hypnosis trained along with a bunch of other things, and I truly think that when it comes to saving a marriage, at least one spouse needs to do this deep work. You got to do the trauma work, the working on the emotions, the release of the emotions, working on even our self-confidence. Am I enough? Am I not heard? And do I need validation? Am I a fool for staying? Am I not feeling in control? Like we got to work on those things before we can fully really repair a marriage and heal from infidelity. So anyway, I'm Beth Miller. You can find me on lots of different social media platforms, but if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Click the notification so you get all my lives that come out every week. And those that are on YouTube, feel free to join our Facebook group, Women That Want to Save Their Marriages After Infidelity. So I'll put all those links below in the notes. So let's get started. All right, should you read the messages? Big question. Should you read the messages? Yes or no? And during those first few weeks, you want to, right? You're in this truth-seeking phase. Your husband isn't necessarily being transparent and open, especially if you've been asking. It's like, no, I'm not having an affair. Nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. And then you get a hold of the phone and you realize, yeah, there is. There's all these messages. And then you go down that rabbit hole because you just want to know. Sick to your stomach, seeing this stuff, like this disbelief, this shock of what's happening. So you go on this truth-seeking hunt. And there's this massive desire to understand the details. As humans, we want to know why. Why did this happen? Because if we know the why, we can then prevent it from happening again. But the thing is with this, so often your husbands don't know why they did it. They are like I told you a moment ago, they're telling their own stories in their head. They're trying to create these concoctions of not really understanding why they're seeking this other validation elsewhere, why they're hiding things, like what is going on here. They don't often know why it's happening. And if they did, they probably wouldn't be in this place, like they wouldn't be there. So there's often, it's not about you. It's typically about them, whether it's a midlife crisis or whether it's something they've been running or whether they've just kind of cracked under just being someone that they're not. So wanting to know how it happened, right? How it happened, why it happened. And this information can be an essential part of the recovery process. Does it need to happen? Do you need to understand why? Not necessarily. I can get my clients to a place where they don't fully understand why, but they can heal from the trauma so that they can then move on. Because in many cases, a betrayal, like a husband doesn't even know why they did it, right? So sometimes we do have to just move on. And what's so interesting that, I think what's so ironic is a cheating spouse, they can be really open and honest, but what happens sometimes is if they've started it out with a lie, like nothing's wrong, and then you discover the lies, when they start to become open and honest, if they ever do, a lot don't, you then don't trust them, right? Because you're like, are you actually telling me the truth this time? You're saying the affair was only 2 months, but really was it actually 6 months? And then you want to go back to the text messages to see if you can find any more, or whatever the platform may be, WhatsApp, whatever they're talking on, Instagram. So once hidden texts are discovered, there's a lot of trouble trusting, and that's a whole nother live, and I can link some lives in below, like how do you trust after infidelity, how do you deal with the intrusive thoughts, like these text messages that are coming through. So that's another live that you can watch, and I can link that training below. So what else is there to do, right, when you don't feel like you have the answers? And the answer is, you got to read the text messages. That's what we think the answer is. So let me go through the pros and the cons of reading the messages. And again, like I said, some are really obvious, some are not. But one of the pros are clarity, wanting that clarity, maybe seeking that closure. So reading the messages provide like a clear understanding of the nature of the affair. When did it start? Why did it start? And sometimes it starts really quite innocent. It's not like the partner is actually seeking out the affair. They really started to enjoy this connection, someone who understood them differently. And then as the wife, you're hurt, like, why did you go to her? You could have just come to me. But there is some sort of ease to this, no attachment to it. There's no history there. It just seems very easy, right? Sometimes the affair partner doesn't have the same judgment. Not that you're judging, but there's something there. There's a reason why they had it. And so having that clarity can be an essential part, but not necessarily part of moving forward. Verification, that's another pro. Like, okay, truth verification. You told me this, but I'm seeing this in the text message. Okay, they line up, or they don't line up. An emotional release as well. So sometimes when women are reading the messages, there's a buildup of feelings, and sometimes it can really come out when you start reading those messages as well. It can also facilitate more trauma, but it can also help release some as well, helping you process the emotions. All right, there's the pros. Let's go into the cons. The cons are, first one I have, it's just like massive emotional trauma, which I just alluded to. Sometimes it can help with the emotional release, but other times it can help create more trauma. So the content of the messages, like, beyond painful, right? Like heartbreaking, like it's like you're watching a movie. Like, is this actually my life? Is this actually happening? Is this my husband? You may have had a marriage that was phenomenal, so good, and you're completely derailed. What did we actually have? Like, were we living a lie? Was this a facade that, like, what is real, what's not real? So the content of the messages can be extremely painful, which can lead to further emotional trauma, and the explicit details may be more than you can handle. And that's why we have to get into the questions I'm going to ask in a little bit. Like, what if you end up reading something you can't handle, and then it's like burned in your mind, and a lot of you may be there already. You're like, it's burned, it's in there. How do I get it out? And like I said, we'll give you some other trainings on what to do to get those out. Thank you everyone for watching. Feel free to drop in the comments. Have you read the messages? Have you not read the messages? Are you wondering if you should read the messages? So tell me below. When we start reading the messages too, one of the massive cons is fixation on the details, wanting to know the details, because like I said a moment ago, when you know why, when you know how, then we can try and solve it from happening again. So this fixation of knowing every detail that led to this unhealthy relationship with this other woman, right? So this fixation can make it really hard to move past. And part of this is we go on this like truth-seeking hunt, and we can get stuck in it, wanting to know. Also, it's a protection, because if we're constantly looking, we're looking at the messages, we can see if it's still happening. A lot of wives I work with, they have this thought of, if I'm not checking, it could just be happening, and then I could be blindsided again. I'm just blindly trusting. And so if they stay on the messages and keep looking, they're safe. But in fact, what happens when you go to check the messages, just think about if you have been there, the heart palpitations that come, just like that tightness in your body, like, what am I going to find? Typically, I don't know, maybe you are, but you can go into the messages quite relaxed and just start looking at them. But typically there's this like, what am I going to discover? Your body's ready for it. It's already in that kind of emotional nervous system, like fight, flight, freeze mentality. I often encourage the wives I work with that, you know what, it's great to have passwords so that you can read the messages. Like, it's awesome because it's, you know what, a safety thing. If something were to happen to your husband, then I think there's a trust there that we have it, but not using it. Not using it as like, I want to check, because that's going to sometimes, unless your husband has complete, open, like honest, like, yeah, just keep checking. You want to look at it, go look at it. But I think that's great. Like, it has to be like this common, like, every once in a while, like, you want to go check, great. But to have it and like secretively wanting to like go in the night in the bedroom and just kind of figure out like, what has he been doing? That is not great. It creates more distrust. It's not good for you. Your authentic self, like that true you inside, is probably like, don't do it, don't do it. But that little voice within you is like, we need it. We need to check. We need to know we're safe. We need to know it's not happening again. This hurts so bad. What if it happens more? So really getting clear on what voice within you wants to do that checking. Okay, so another con, like, again, these aren't shocking, but sometimes it's good just to talk them and unpack them a bit. Like kind of what I alluded to, the impact on reconciliation. So if you are checking the messages, what is that doing to trust? You want to trust him, but he wants to trust you too, that in some cases that you're not trusting him, which Yes. That you're mothering, or that you're being a detective, that you're the police, like you're policing him. That can be really hard too, and that could actually keep him from opening up because he feels judged a lot. So reading all the messages might make it more difficult to rebuild trust in that intimacy with your partner, as the explicit content also, this can also do it as well, can create these long-lasting negative effects because of the images and the feelings. So even for you too, like if you're seeing images, like when you're intimate with your husband again, like you sometimes get these flashes of, did he do this with her? Yeah, that's tough, right? It's really, really tough. So do we need to know all that? And if you've already done it, there's ways to fix this. Trust me, many of the clients I work with have seen these explicit images and text messages, and we can move past them so that they're not constantly creeping in. Trauma. What is trauma? Trauma really is, it can be complex trauma when many, many events have kind of changed who we are, but really changed how we respond to things for the worst. Like our response behavior has changed. And that's what this is a lot of times. Like things are different. Like it's ingrained in your head, it's burned in your head, and it's creating anxiety. And so there's more criteria to trauma, but that's essentially what we're talking about here. All right, so talked about pros and cons. Now really the reasons to read it. So let's dig a little bit more into the reasons wanting to read the messages. And these reasons will help you prepare with trying to decide to read or not to read. So let's talk about this. Like why do you want to read them? And I get a journal. If you have a piece of paper right now, write these down. Why do you want to read the messages? And I want you to list it out, all the reasons why. I want to read the messages because blah, 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 blah. And when you write that all out, I want you to, again, take that voice. And I've talked about this voice. It's like your authentic voice. It's like, it could be your intuition, but what's it saying? Is your intuition telling you something's wrong, or is it just fear? And our intuition gets so squashed when this happens. So just trying to figure out what voice, is it pain, trauma, fear that's asking me to read these messages? Or is it like, you know what? I need to know this. I need like that higher vibe. You can sense it with the vibe. Our emotions, like emotion is energy emotion. Our emotion we have, the vibe in our body, if it's higher, lighter, that's a good thing. That's where we want to be making decisions from. But if it's this like heavy, sad, fearful, fear drives those reading of the messages quite often. So why do you want to read the messages? Figuring out, all the reasons, and which one is really the authentic voice. Next one, 2, ask yourself this. Will reading the messages help you heal? Do you need to know this for your healing? And do you need it to heal? Do you need to, you know what, will reading the messages help me? Or what is the information within it that you need to see? Is it the explicit images that they send? Is it the words they used? Is it more the like kind of logistics, like how often they were meeting, how often they were talking, like the volume of text messages? So will be reading the messages help? And so maybe I'm going through that first, like what is the information I'm trying to extract here? And again, when you're trying to read the messages, obviously you can't just extract like, well, I guess you could if you didn't read the messages, like how many there are, periods of time, or looking at the phone records, that's often one as well. Will reading the messages help rebuild trust on both parties? Like, will it help you rebuild trust because you then know the details? Will it help him build trust with you? You know what? That one I'm not as worried about. I'm worried more about you. But number 3, 4, I guess it's 4. How much information do you want to know? And that's kind of the same as like, will reading the messages help you heal? But how much do you actually want to know? And then kind of put together, like, how much can you handle? And so someone who just found out about the affair, like, D-Day was yesterday, Discovery Day was yesterday, who just found out, reading all those messages, can they handle it? It's a lot. It's a ton. That's what puts you into shock. That's what really builds the trauma, versus someone who is maybe 2 months down the road and is seeing it from a different lens. They're not as like in that state of shock. They've been able to talk to their partner a little bit more about the details, and then they're kind of looking through this together. Like, there's how much can you handle? And I think looking at the time period. But I know in the beginning you're like grasping for straws. You're like, what happened? I need to know. And you're just on that truth-seeking hunt. And then I guess the last one here is like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst case scenario of what you might read? And I think this question isn't for everyone. It's more for some. Like, what is the worst case scenario? Is it going to be like, I love you? Like, is that, if you read that, what is the worst case scenario? And can you handle it? Like, if you were to read, I love you, I miss you, I want to marry you, we're going to be together forever. If you read that stuff, will you be okay? So I think really setting yourself up for what can I handle is really, really important in this process. But ultimately, do I need to know this for my healing? So based on those answers, you'll have a lot clearer understanding of what you can handle, what you need to hear, and when the right time is to read those messages. And if now is not the right time, like your body's probably screaming, I want to read them, but you're like, no, can't handle it right now. Yeah, so if now is not the right time, it doesn't mean that you're never going to be ready, like I just said, to read them. There's no timeline. There's no timeline, but it's really listening to your insides. You're going through a ton. You need all that information. So I would suggest going through this process, obviously, with a support coach or a therapist or a marriage coach, going through this with someone else. And like I said, if you want more of these trainings, I have tons of free trainings. Like I said in a few minutes ago, I will link below how to handle intrusive thoughts, how to rebuild trust. I'll put some of those links below, so feel free to read through or watch a few of my videos and check out some of the guides. And also, if you want to reach out to me, you want to have a quick 15-minute chat to see if there's a way that I can help you, I'll put a link below as well, like a little 15-minute marriage saver call, like a roadmap call, and I'll give you a few suggestions on how to move forward, how to move through the pain of the text messages that you may have read, or rebuilding trust. So anyway, everyone that's on YouTube, feel free to join our Facebook group, links below, for those who want to save their marriage after infidelity. And those of you that are in the Facebook group and you want these notifications, just click the notification, like, subscribe. And yeah, everyone, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.